Hare Krishna. Welcome, everyone. We're now going to have a short discussion, much shorter than the sages at Naimisharanya. They gathered for 1,000 years. We'll just be here for a few minutes. But we can always take advantage of every minute, thinking that every moment of human life is precious. It's a preparation, because the human body is a special facility to fully develop one's consciousness and become Krishna conscious, which ultimately means to develop prema, or love for Krishna. As the esteemed Bhagavad Ashray Prabhu pointed out this morning, that love for Krishna is already there within the heart, but due to association with matter since a time immemorial, the soul becomes distracted and covered by various conceptions of life called upadhis. For instance, one might think that I am a man or a woman or a cat or a dog. Or one might think that I'm American, or I'm Canadian, or I'm Ethiopian, or I'm Indian. However, these are temporary designations. Our real designation is mentioned by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. And he gives the perspective of somebody who's come to perfect knowledge and has become learned. And he says, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmaniga Vihastani Shuni Chaiva Shupakecha Pandita Samadarshina. That a learned person doesn't see a body. Although, yes, he or she sees the body, but actually he's fully aware that there's a soul within each body, and that soul is part and parcel of Krishna. It's an eternal servant of Krishna. And therefore, although he may interact with people in a dutiful way, for instance, the tiger is not one to be petted, or if one is dealing with others, one should do so with decorum. However, at the same time, the devotee sees and gives respect to the soul and the supersoul within each body. And Krishna mentions this in the Bhagavad Gita in many places, but one is Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridaya Sharajuna Tishtiti Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantram Rudrani Mayaya. He says that I come with you, the soul, everywhere you go, in every body. So we may know that when we look at someone, we mustn't just see the external feature, that here's a person from a certain station in life, or this is a particular kind of body. But we should know that not only is the soul there, but also Krishna is there. So we can offer respects to all living beings. And especially those who have evolved their consciousness. As we just read, Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta dikshasti chet pranatibisha bhajantamisham shushushaya bhajanavignya mananya manya nindadi shunya hridamipsita sangalabhya. This is a verse we recited earlier in our kind of mantra trance we were doing. Did you all feel like a little trance? Did you feel like your brain got bigger? Much bigger, right? So it's important to take time in the day to chant the Sanskrit shlokas from the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and other Vaishnava literatures, because then they're always there with you when you need them. And we always need them. And so there's a way in which, what was I about to say? From the Sri Upanishad or something? Huh? Oh yeah, thank you. There are various levels of devotees. The first level is one who just says Hare Krishna. Second level is somebody who's made a vow to chant Hare Krishna. And the third level is somebody who made a vow and has been chanting steadily and whose heart has actually changed because of that, and then becomes a refined person, which means, according to this verse, Nindadi Shunya Hridamipsita Sangalabhya. That person is no longer interested in decrying the activities of others because of envy. But Nindadi Shunya means, Ninda means I have the tendency to criticize others because it makes me feel better about myself. Well, they're not that good. I could have done that, etc. But the person is purified in heart, and therefore doesn't have the propensity of envy anymore within the heart. This is an evolved person. Because Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that it's natural in this world to have this tendency to hate. Icha dvesha sumutena dvandva mohina bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sarge yanti parandapa. The nature of the interactions between living beings in this world is icha dvesha. There's desire, I want something from you. And also, I hate that you have something that I don't have. These are the two features. That's why everyone fights all the time. It's like, how come you moved your fence 2 inches towards this is my land? It's not your land. It's not your water either. Nothing belongs to us in this world. Everything belongs to Krishna. Nonetheless, I label everything. This is mine. That's yours. You stay over there. I stay over here. And then we fight. But the devotee is not interested in fighting. Of course, the devotees will fight. Arjuna fought for dharma. But only on behalf of Krishna do they fight. Not on their own desire that I want something. That the devotees want something only for Krishna. And dvesha, devotees actually are like Krishna in the sense that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Samaham sarvabhuteshu name dvesho stina priya. That I'm equal to everybody. I don't have friends and enemies. I don't make this distinction. He's my friend, he's my enemy. They're all parts and parcels of Krishna. And ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya maite teshu chapyaham. If somebody out of the souls steps forward and says that I'm following Krishna, I'm going to worship Krishna, and then Krishna says, ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya, that bhakta, that person, then I'm in him and he's in me. There's an intimate connection. That intimate connection's already there, but it's to be realized through the process of Krishna consciousness and purification. So this next song is a song written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of the great acharyas in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who helped to spread the Sankirtan movement all over the world. And he wrote this song to give us a window into the spiritual world. What is going on in the spiritual world that most people don't talk about? If you look up today on CNN, Fox News, I don't recommend it, either any of these, MSNBC or New York Times, Washington Post, you won't find this song. People are talking about who killed who, who killed whom, and all the wranglings going on in the material world. How high is inflation? How far did the stock market drop? How much further is it going to drop? And et cetera, ad infinitum. These things are always going on, but they never think of the spiritual world. You'll nary will you find a word about the spiritual world. So we have the luxury of sitting here together this morning and singing about Krishna in the spiritual world. And this song is called Jaya Radha Madhava, and it has all the names of Krishna, especially those in relationship to his devotees. There's different kinds of devotees. Some devotees worship Krishna in a passive way. They are adding something to the environment by being there and just appreciating Krishna. And then there's the devotees who think of Krishna in service. They're so grateful. They tip over at a certain point from appreciation into, I have to do something for this person. He's so wonderful. And these are the servants of Krishna. And there are many different kinds of servants, but they're the ones who move into action and they want to do some service. They're there in the spiritual world also. And then the next level comes as the sakhas, the friends of Krishna, those who develop a friendly, loving relationship with Krishna. And some of those friendships actually in the spiritual world, especially Goloka Vrindavan, which is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita, Goloka Namni Nija Damni, it's the personal abode of Krishna. Then those devotees, they feel equal with Krishna. Although no one's equal to Krishna, in the Goloka Vrindavan, where Krishna associates with his devotees, then there's this sense of equality because Krishna suppresses his opulence as the supreme so that he can just have loving relationships with his devotees. And then there are the devotees who try to nurture Krishna, like the parents. And the cows are also in Vatsalya Ras because they're always thinking, how can I give milk to Krishna? And his parents, and the parent, like in a village actually, for a little child, everyone's a mother. It's not separated. That's my child, nobody else. But in the village life, especially Vrindavan, all the mothers come. They're all there nurturing. So this is a mood of Vatsalya. And then there's Madhurya Ras, where the devotees have this unbounded love for Krishna. And it's more like boyfriend, girlfriend, although it doesn't have the implications that it does in this world. This world is a opposite because it's a reflection of the spiritual world. What's most exalted there becomes the most degraded here. So this song has the names of Krishna in relationship with his devotees in the spiritual world. So what's important about us singing these names? Well, just imagine that if somebody, any of us were walking down the street in Kuala Lumpur. Anybody been there? Okay. Let's say you're in a neighborhood you've never been to before in Kuala Lumpur. And you're walking down the street and let's say you have a nickname. Nobody knows it but your mother. Anybody have a nickname that only your mother knows? Yes? So you're walking down the street and then all of a sudden someone leans out the window and that says, "Hey, Kana." And then you think, who was that? How did they know that's my nickname? And you'd spin around and you'd think, who knows me? And in the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's process of devotional service, we actually relish and sing and repeat the names of Krishna in the spiritual world in relationship with his most intimate devotees. And when he hears those, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, that 11th canto, 2nd chapter, 55th verse, Vrishrijati hridayamna yasya sakshad dari ravisha abhihito pyagoganata. There's a way that if anybody utters the name of Krishna, he's inclined to give many benedictions to that person. But pranaya, rasanaya, pranaya, dritangri padma, if you sing his names with love and you know what you're doing, which is a whole nother realm, then you tie up his lotus feet in your heart and he won't leave you ever. So if anyone wants to know how to be successful in life, how to be fortunate, how to be happy, it's just to sing the names of God. And these are the best of names because they're the nicknames of Krishna in relationship with his devotees. Shall we try it? Sounds a little scary. Maybe we shouldn't do it. Let's stop and we'll bring a TV and watch CNN instead. What do you think? No? Okay, let's try. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Nanda Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari. Second line down. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, the first mantra in the book that we're going to look at today, called Srimad Bhagavatam, is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll say, and we can repeat 3 times together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And the next mantra is one that where we're offering obeisances to the author, to Goddess Saraswati, and we're getting ready to enter into hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye. And now, since I used up so much time earlier chanting shlokas till the cows came home, then we'll go right to the Bhagavatam. And today I'm going to read to you from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, which is entitled The Lord in the Heart. Just check your heart. See if the Lord's in there. Is he there? Okay, good. And I'll read the Sanskrit and then the translation, and then we'll go into the purport, which is a commentary given by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Tenat manat manam upaiti shantam anandam anandamayo vasane etam gatin bhagavatim gatohya savai punar neha vishuddhate na. Translation is, only the purified soul can attain the perfection of associating with the personality of Godhead in complete bliss and satisfaction in His conditional state. Whoever is able to renovate such devotional perfection is never again attracted by this material world, and he never returns. Here's the purport. We should specially note in this verse the description of Gatim Bhagavatim, to become merged in the rays of the Parabrahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as desired by the Brahman. I'm sorry? That number is 2231. But you can just listen. Sages didn't have a PowerPoint. We should specially note in this verse the description of Gatim Bhagavatim, to become merged in the rays of the Parabrahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as desired by the Brahmavadi impersonalist, is not Bhagavatim perfection. The Bhagavatas never accept merging in the impersonal rays of the Lord, but always aspire after personal association with the Supreme Lord in one of the Vaikuntha spiritual planets in the spiritual sky. The whole of the spiritual sky, of which the total number of the material skies is only an insignificant part, is full of unlimited numbers of Vaikuntha planets. The destination of the devotee, the Bhagavata, is to enter into one of the Vaikuntha planets, in each of which the personality of Godhead in His unlimited personal expansions enjoys Himself in the association of unlimited numbers of pure devotee associates. The conditioned souls in the material world, after gaining emancipation by devotional service, are promoted to these planets. But the number of ever liberated souls is far, far greater than the number of conditioned souls in the material world, and the ever-liberated souls in the Vaikuntha planets never care to visit this miserable material world. I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada and to all of you, because you are Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. Now, let's hear what you heard in the first paragraph, or see if you have a question. Yes, Prabhu. To the life and soul of Koladweep.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So Maharaj, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that the Brahman realization is not proper, or it's complete realization. But if you read 1 to 11, there it says like the absolute truth can be realized in 3 ways. So we know that only the Sat aspect is there, means the eternity aspect is there in Brahman realization. But those who are actually aspiring for that realization, there are references that it's not complete. But if you can actually a little bit elaborate how they are not complete, that will be really helpful.
Sure. Well, those who read the Bhagavad Gita hear directly from Krishna, and that's not so hard. It's available to everybody, has been for thousands of years. And incidentally, its textual purity is well known because it's been guarded by the great acharyas who have commentated on the Bhagavad Gita practically more than any other book that actually empirically you can discern this, that the commentaries are abundant on the Bhagavad Gita, and therefore it's been watched very carefully. It's all in place. And in the Gita, Krishna cuts to the chase. It's the Gita-upanishad. He's actually giving the essence of all the advice, because after all, it's only 700 verses. The Padma Purana and other books like that, you can't count the verses practically and never come to the end of it. This is very short and to the point. Krishna says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukasya ikandikasya cha. He gives us a point that I'm the basis of the impersonal Brahman. So when you know a subject, as the Bhagavatam then points out, Vadanti tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdite, that you should know things in relationship to other things. The problem is when the cause of the Brahman is not understood, and people get it reversed, and then they think Brahman is the ultimate goal, and then when Krishna comes, it's actually a material thing. His body, they think, is made of the 3 modes of material nature. And as some commentators, in an unauthorized way, with no support shastrically, have said, well, when Krishna says you should think of me, you should surrender to me, it's not Krishna you should think of, it's the unborn within Krishna you should think of. This is rank speculation, because there's no shastric support for such a statement. But nonetheless, Krishna says, avyaktam vyaktam manyate mama buddhaya param bhavam bhajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Plenty of people get it wrong. And then they think that from the unmanifested, I manifest. But Krishna gives it very clearly that I'm the basis of impersonal Brahman. So one should know when one worships Brahman, and there's nothing wrong with it because it's Krishna. But one should know what the basis of that is. And people then, according to their appreciating capacity, are able to know various features of the Supreme. As mentioned by Shukadeva Goswami in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the story of Aghasura, he says, Itam satam brahma sukhanubhutya dasyam gatanam paradaivatena mayashitanam naradarakena sakam vrajaru krita punya punja. He names the ways in which people in various types of consciousness become aware of the Supreme. So, first of all, he says, there are some that are only aware of Brahman. So they think God is just the light. And then he said there's some that are in this mood of reverence towards God, and that they see him as Lord Hari in Vaikuntha only. Then there are some who are covered by the modes of nature, and they just think he's an ordinary person like them. Maybe a little more expert, like Duryodhan. Everyone knows Duryodhan, right? One of the figures of the Mahabharata. Actually, he was demoniac mentality. He thought, and of course back then, 5,000 years ago, practically everyone had some mystic potency. So he had, and then he thought, well, Krishna is a little better than me, but not a big deal. Not to get all excited about. and so, Mayashritanam, Naradarakena, he's just Naradarakena. He's just an ordinary person. Then, Sakamvrja Rukrita Punya Punja, but those who have gotten Bhakti Unmukhi Sukriti, that means it's this very special association with pure devotees who know Krishna's personal form and have a relationship with him, as I mentioned before. And know him as the origin of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam. Yeah, if someone knows Krishna is the origin of everything, including Brahman and including the Paramatma, everything's emanating from him, and understands all these categories, then they, with all their heart, they worship Krishna. So there's nothing wrong with worshiping Brahman. Nor is there anything wrong with worshiping devas, for that matter, as long as one understands who's the boss. Because there are different philosophies. And maybe in Buddhism, they'll say, ultimately, there's no boss. And Mayavad, they say, well, you're the boss, you just haven't realized it yet. And then there's the materialistic people. They're all fighting amongst themselves, trying to become boss. Only the Vaishnavas say, Krishna's the boss, nobody else. And that's what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. That's, he says, Matak paratanam nanyat kinchid asti dhananjaya, mai sarvamidam protam sutri manigana iva. Everything's hanging on me as pearls are strung on a thread. There's nobody that's better than me or higher than me. And that's good for us because we don't want that role. We can't handle it. Just try it here in the material world. Everyone will jump on you. It's like, you're not the boss. As soon as you become the boss, then everyone starts writing about you in the paper, saying, like, what kind of boss is he? Who does he think he is? He's making a merger on this company? Everyone wants to criticize. But if you're a servant of the 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 servant, a million times removed of the boss, then you become a great soul and you're exalted. So Lord Chaitanya puts everything in perspective, and so that we can actually take up the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, which is commonsensical and it's good for us. And he shows us how to understand the different categories of the Supreme, because he's variegated. Parasya Shaktir Vivadaiva Shuyate Swabhavika Jnana Bala Kriyacha. There are many aspects of or energies. They're multifarious energies of the Lord. And the categories of the Supreme are also mentioned in other Puranas, like the Vishnu Purana, Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta, Kshetra Gyakya Tara Para, Avidya Karma Sangyangya, Tritya Shakti Rishite. The Vishnu Purana, as quoted by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami, says that, okay, there's the internal potency, it's spiritual. Then there's the external potency, that's the material world. And then there's us. There's the tatastha jiva. Tatastha means we're marginal energy. We can associate either with the material world or the spiritual world. So in coming to a full knowledge, one has to know Vadanti Tat, Tattva Vidas. We have to know Tattva. The word Tat is the same in English. It's that. You just add an H and you've got that. It's a demonstrative pronoun. It's the same thing as Tat. It came from Sanskrit. And you're just pointing to something and say that. And there's a sense, if you can point to it, it exists. That's what Tat means. Tat means that exists. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that there's those who are seers understand what actually exists and what is constantly changing, and they can see the nature of both. And therefore, if one says, oh, God's just energy, then he's made a categorical mistake. or a category mistake. He's the energetic. He's not the energy. So we can appreciate the impersonal Brahman, but we must know where it's coming from. Why? Because ultimately, when we come to know that there's a person behind all this energy, then we can actually direct our loving propensity towards him. It's very difficult to love Brahman. Paramatma, okay, but in Paramatma, actually, by definition, it's a mercantile relationship. That's why he's here, to fulfill the desires of all the living entities, because I want, like a little child. If you watch a child, it's all day long, I want, and I want some more. And always asking, I want. So the living entities in the material world, it's me. Look at me. Yes, please look at me. And then Paramatma's there. It's like, how can I help you? But that's not God's ultimate role. His ultimate role, as Prabhupada points out in the Srimad Bhagavatam, is he's got his own life. Yes, he's watching out for us here like a parent. He's got one of those little devices, you put in one room, so it records the child in there, and you're in the other room reading the paper or something, and you can hear the child's breathing. It's like, hey, he's fine. And then he wakes up and they're like, okay, what do you want? That's Paramatma. He's listening in on us all the time with one of those little devices. And it's like, you want something? So you can feed me. It's okay, here's your food. And then every living entity gets food from Paramatma. He's taking care of everyone. Nityo nityanam, chaitanas chaitananam, eko bahunam, yoviditati kaman. But is that God's job, just to take care of us? No, just like your parents, they have their own life. Like, you don't even know until later. I didn't know. How much did I know my parents? I only met them when they were 40, because I was youngest in the family. And then I was a baby and a completely self-centered little, twerp until I was, well, I still am. So, but how could I know much about them? They have their own life besides like feeding me, where's the peanut butter? Come on, hurry up. All this stuff as a kid. And, they had their own life. I didn't know much about it. I still don't. But when I look back and I think, wow, they're independent people. So God's got his own life too. That's the Nijadam. He doesn't just take care of us, whatever we want. It's like, I want a new car. God, can I have a new car? It's like, yeah, you got to work a little for it, and it's going to get bashed up, but you can have it, You're not going to like it once you get it, but, whatever you want, little jiva. And he's taking care of everyone, but that's not his ultimate role. He has his own interests. He has his own family. He has his own lovers, and he's fully absorbed there. So that's Bhagavan. Just by logic, if you look at the completeness of God, you have to understand that he has his Nijadam, his own place. Is that Rasa Sindhu? I can never tell who's here because of the mask syndrome. Hare Krishna. So, it's a complete subject matter in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Brahman is explained, Paramatma is explained, and Bhagavan is explained. And this is highly important. Why? Because, as we know, Srila Vyasadeva went to great trouble to explain Brahman and Paramatma. Not so much Bhagavan. And his spiritual master knew that Vyasa was in distress, and therefore he came to visit him. Guru says, what's wrong? You don't look right. I know, I don't feel good, and it's really strange because I've done so much service, and I tried to do the right thing. I wrote all these Vedas, and Narada goes, yeah, you blew it. Tatonyata, kinchana yadvavakshata. He says, whatever you desire to describe that doesn't reach the threshold of describing Bhagavan, he said, that'll simply disturb people's minds. Naishkarmyam apyachuta bhavasha, varjitam nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam, kutakpana shashvada padramishvarena charpitam karma yadapyakaranam. He says, even if you describe self-realization, and it ends at this understanding of Naishkarmyam, that work without fruit of results, material world's not my home, I'll just be absorbed in the self. He says, That's not very nice. Niranjanam, no interest in the material world whatsoever. Still, you leave him hanging, he said, and it's not beautiful. So what you need, he says, Naishkarmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam. You need achuta bhava, or this sense of love for Krishna. And when you have that, then you actually have what is the most important aspect of life. And in Bhagavatam also, there's indication that we can't extricate ourselves from the variety of the material world unless we have a sense of that personal relationship with Krishna in the spiritual world. Because we're inextricably tied to the material world. What happens is, as soon as we come out of the womb, the senses that we have a relationship with their objects in the material world. Have you ever noticed that? You just talking to your senses, you watch them throughout the day. It's like, why are you going over there? It's like, that's where I live. That's me. That's my thing. I'm connected. We're one. And little living entity, Jiva, comes out of the womb with a new body. Everything's tied up, already tied up. No way of getting out. And it's like, no, I like this. This is what I'm used to. This is the conditioned experience. And until one gets a sense for an aesthetic beauty that is real, it's visceral, and that is a higher taste, then one can't possibly give up the inextricable connection to the sense objects in the material world and the sense that I belong to the material world. I can't give that up unless I have another place to go. Brahman doesn't provide that. It's way too ethereal. And Paramatma doesn't satisfy that. It's tit for tat. But Bhagavan, the idea of the love life of the Supreme. Everyone loves the Supreme. Everyone's there with Krishna. And there's rhythm there. Everyone? Music? You like music? That's where it comes from, spiritual world. 16,000 ragas come from the 16,000 principal gopis. There's 16,000 ragas. Could we learn them all? Possibly, if we worked really hard every day. But that's what's in the spiritual world. Beauty, loving relationship, nonstop, what everyone's looking for. Therefore, in Bhagavatam, the Kumaras say, Yat pada pankacha palasa vilasya bhakta karmashrayam gratitam udgartayanti santa tadvanda rikta matayo yatayo piruta shroto ganas tamaranam bhajavasudevam. And for the devotees who become entangled in this love of the spiritual world and the relationship that Krishna has with his devotees, then they can easily rise above the variety of the material world, because here it is odious. Research department, the word odious. You'll get your definition in 7 seconds or less, or your money back from today's class. Microphones to the research department, please. Work with me, people.
Odious is from the late 14th century, and it means hateful, deserving of hatred, hated, regarded with aversion or repugnance. And it's from Anglo-French odious, from Old French odious, or directly from Latin odiosus, hateful, offensive, unpleasant, from odium, which is hatred.
Hatred? Yeah, we don't exactly hate the material world, but we do find it objectionable once we see the beauty of the spiritual world. But tadvanda rikta matayo means that if you don't have that sense of connection to the form, the qualities, the stories of the spiritual world, the beauty of it all, then you're rikta matayo, your head's empty. And what it'll fill up with? CNN, CSM, MSNBC, Fox, what else is there? New York Times, Washington Post, blah, blah, blah. Same thing recycled over and over again. And even the best of literature in the material world, you can go into studying literature. And no doubt, it has an attractive feature to it. And when you read literature that actually has some refinement to it. But the Bhagavatam, Tadvag Visargo Janataga Viplavo Yasmin Pratishlokam Vadyavadyapi. Amidst all the literatures in the world, they pale in comparison to the beauty of the language of the Bhagavatam describing the spiritual world. It's inexplicable. And even amongst all the Vedas, and there's thousands, millions of verses in the Vedas and Puranas. Amidst all of them, the Bhagavatam stands as the king above all of them. And so if one can then become acquainted with and then even slightly attracted to the idea of Krishna in the spiritual world and catch on to the narrative of the spiritual world, then one no longer cherishes or is obligated, for that matter, to be absorbed in all the other stuff in the material world. If you don't get absorbed in Krishna Katha, then you're obligated to CNN, Fox, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, Reuters. I don't know what else there is, but they're plentiful, and it's all saying the same stuff. It's all chatter about the material world, and you can predict what's going to happen. There's going to be good news followed by really bad news. And it just goes on and on and on. And if you look at your astrological chart, if you want to spend all the money for that, then somebody who probably doesn't know what he or she is doing anyway, Gaur Premanande, they'll look at it and they'll say, you're going to have really good luck and then it's going to go bad. You're going to be really smart, then you're going to be really stupid. And so this is back and forth in the material world. It is a source of nauseum for the living being. We're getting, nausea comes from a word that means seasickness. We're getting seasick from riding on the waves of the material world. So we could take shelter of the highest conception of God in the spiritual world, which is the personal form. And then we'll actually feel satisfied. And even as we chant his names and look at a picture of Krishna or see the deity, we'll feel satisfaction that that's where I belong. That's my eternal home. Now, if somebody would please bring a chair up here for my dear godbrother, His Grace Bhagavad Ashray Prabhu, put it here and put another microphone stand up. Then we'll answer a few questions together. If you'll encourage him to please come up and welcome. That's it? Okay, let's see if somebody else has another question to open the conversation even wider. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please
Hare
accept
Krishna.
my humble obeisances.
Haribol.
So my question is, how does one protect oneself from the impersonal influences, especially with my profession in psychiatry and psychology? All the literature that is either atheistic or it's very impersonalistic. So so it leaves the heart very vacant if whenever one delves much deeper in the literature, and so so that's my question. That how
Your question is in one sentence?
I'm sorry.
What's your question in one sentence?
So my question is, how does one protect oneself from the impersonal influences within this world?
My understanding is there's only one way, and that is to become consciously completely dependent on Krishna in all activities. There's 2 verses in the 18th chapter where Krishna says, Cetasa savakamani mai sanyasya matpara buddhi yoga mupasricha machchita satatam bhava machchita excuse me, machchita savadurgani matprasadat tarishyasi atachet tvam ahankaran nashroshyasi vinangshasi. It says, in all activities, just depend upon me and work under my protection. In such devotional service, become conscious of me. If you become conscious of me, you will fully conscious of me, you will cross over all of the obstacles of material existence by my grace. If, however, you do not hear me but act out of false ego, you will be lost. And the impersonalist philosophy is the most full-blown manifestation of false ego. It is, as Prabhupada says, the last snare of Maya. So, atachet tvam ahankaran vinoshasi, nasroshasi vinangshasi. And then before that, machchita savadurgani matprasadat tarishasi. But it begins with consciously becoming dependent upon Krishna for everything. Because we are completely dependent upon Krishna for everything. So as we try to expand our consciousness, there are pitfalls along the way. There are traps. Because we still have the influence of false ego. False ego doesn't just vanish immediately when we become devotees. But this false ego, earlier in the 3rd chapter, Krishna says, ahankaram vimudatma. Under the influence of the false ego, we become vimudatma. We become very foolish. And all of these things that Vaisesika Prabhu was talking about before, of falling into the illusion that I'm the boss, or you're the boss, or we're all the boss, or we haven't realized that we're the boss yet, and so on. These are all things that arise because we are under the influence of the false ego. The chanting of the holy name actually dissolves the false ego, gradually dissolves the false ego away as we become consciously more and more dependent upon the chanting of the holy name. A further point is in his instructions to Sanatana Goswami, Lord Chaitanya says one thing and then he reinforces it with a verse from the Ramayana, that any person who just once, with full sincerity, bows before me and says, my Lord, from this day on, I am yours. That person I give full protection to. And as Vaisesika Prabhu was saying, we're tatasta, so we can shift. We can go deep, and then we can think we have to come back up for air again. A little bit of Maya. But the reality is there has to come a time in your life where, having brought some Krishna consciousness into your life, you have to choose then to take your life into Krishna consciousness, into full consciousness of Krishna. And as Vaisesika Prabhu was saying, Krishna has a life. A lot of people over the years, we've had crises in ISKCON where people have come forward and said, oh, Swamiji did not give you the full picture, you have to study this and do that. But if we look at the daily life that is presented in the temple, everything here that goes on from the moment that the Lord is woken up in the morning to the moment he's put to sleep at night, is to do with Krishna's day, what goes on in Krishna's day. So we are gradually trying to regulate ourselves to living in Krishna's life, not having a life of our own. That life, so-called life of our own, is the life of false ego. So there comes a point where in Roman history, there's the story of how they say there's a term that's come down from there, so called crossing the Rubicon. There was a situation where Julius Caesar had conquered all of what is now France, and he'd gathered a huge army, and he was coming back towards Italy, into Rome, and the senators didn't want him to bring his army. They actually secretly wanted to assassinate him. But they said, don't bring your army beyond the Rubicon River. And he got there, and he brought his army across the river, and there was no turning back. So there has to come a point in your life where there's no turning back. You have to turn away from Maya and not look back, and give up all desire to control anything. And just understand that we were chanting this morning. Everything is controlled and owned by the Lord. Everything. So another point in that regard also, from what Vaisesika Prabhu was saying before about, finally you have to accept that Krishna is who he says he is, and who all of the great sages say he is, and that he is a person. He is the supreme absolute personality of Godhead, the absolute truth. And there's a warning in Bhagavad Gita in that regard, that there are many devotees. Of course, I'm sure there's none like this here, but there are many in the process of devotional service, or in the practice of devotional service, who assume themselves to be Krishna conscious and in devotional service. But in their heart of hearts, they don't accept that Krishna is the absolute truth. We have to come to that point in our lives where we just accept that this is the absolute truth. This is the totality of reality, that nothing exists without Krishna. Everything, therefore, is dependent. That word dependent is very nice. Can we look up dependent? Depend, from the Latin, de, from, pend means to hang. So, like a pendulum or a pendulous piece of jewelry off your ear, or a pending file. We all know about those files that are hanging over our heads. The inbox is never empty. So dependence means this: you just, as they say, you sling your hook and you catch a hold of Krishna's lotus feet and you just hang there. And you don't let go. Oh, goodness. I've dreamed about this. Such an honor to be here.
Dependent is relying for existence on, and it comes from Latin dependere, to hang from, hang down, be dependent on, or be derived.
And if you look up in the free dictionary, in their thesaurus, there's also the concept that it depends on Krishna. Everything depends on Krishna, in that everything is determined by Krishna. Ye yatam prapadyante tang stataiva bhajamya. Everything. As he says, they follow my path in all respects. Even if you want to go to hell, you have to go the royal road to hell. There's no, you can't, and even the shortcut, Krishna set that up as well. Everything is determined and dependent, determined by and dependent on Krishna. And that point, I'm sorry to be repetitive, but that point of making it personal. We all have fear of our own personal, individual, spiritual identity in the early stages of devotional service. And we think Krishna's aware of everyone except me. Except me. Somehow or another, I fell through the net. Or who, me? Krishna, yes. Krishna is aware of you.
Mic to the back, please. No, you can sit there. They'll bring you the mic in 7 seconds or less, or your money back from today's class. You got 2 seconds.
Out of your own pocket. The management takes no responsibility.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Prabhu, go ahead.
Work on
Prabhu,
commission.
my question is, if everything is dependent on Krishna and he controls everything, why is there so much misery in the world? Why doesn't he give everybody love and all the good qualities?
It is love, actually. If you look in a responsible family, raising children, there's a way in which if you step into the family and you notice that the parents are giving some stern instruction to the child, some reprimand or go to your room. Anybody ever been sent to a room? That still happen? It does, huh? Yeah, I remember it as a kid. Your wife
sends me to my room all the time.
Go to your room. I can just hear my mom saying it. It's a samskar. So go to your room. It's like, dang, okay, well, I'm in my room now. So is that love? Is that a form of love? There's a way in which a parent has the responsibility to bring the child to maturity. If you just say to the child, I'll give you everything, the child won't be able to take it. You get what's called a spoiled child. Child comes in last and it's like, no, you actually won. You won. Although you didn't study for the test and you failed, it's like, no, you actually passed. This is kind of a modern technique some people have taken up. And there's sociological proof that it actually spoils the child to beyond repair practically. There's a whole generation of people who subscribe to this idea. It's like, it's all good. Whatever your truth is, that's just fine. You do whatever you feel, and we'll still reward you. There's no growth in that. However, when there's a good definition of what's right and wrong, and then the child learns by, okay, I touched this, and this was the consequence. I learned all these things. And then the child comes to maturity. So those who become unhinged, or as the Tatastha Jiva can do, enter into the dark forest of material enjoyment and become lost. There's a way in which Krishna's helping us out of love to come back to this position that Bhagavad Ashray Prabhu was speaking about, which is to come to that momentous time in which I say, that's it, no more, no mas. I'm turning my back on the material world. I'm going back to the spiritual world. And unless we make that decision ourselves through the special training that Krishna lovingly gives us by giving us parameters in the material world, you touch this, this is the result. Why don't we let everyone just drive on the left side of the 101 freeway? So how come I can't drive on the left side of the 101 freeway? Anybody have any idea?
I saw someone doing it the other night.
Well, if you're in India, you see it all the time. It's like, why is there a tractor coming towards me now? Followed by a camel cart? It's like, I thought we were going on the left side here. So there's a way in which there is actual reality, and Krishna's bringing us very lovingly to that point. And to come to that moment when we make our own choice, he's waiting for us, and he's also set up the world in such a way that we can make that decision. And nobody else can make it but us. That's called love. When you actually decide independently that I'm going to surrender to Krishna. That's your choice. That changes the universe. That's why when we see devotees, for instance, who take initiation and they make a vow, that's like the most exciting program anybody can watch, because like, you're actually going to do this? You're entering in here and you're going to say it out loud that I'm dedicating my life to Krishna. And that's just the beginning. Because as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Raga Dvesha Vimuktaistu Vishayan Indriyaishcharan Atmavasharavate Atma Prasadam Arigachati. That if you follow the rules that I've set up, the guidelines, drive on the right side, not on the left, etc., and you just follow this path that I've given you carefully, strictly, you'll come to receive the full grace, my full grace, prasadam arigachati, that will descend to you naturally. It's always available to us. What you're mentioning, why doesn't Krishna give us this or that? He's pouring it on us. The problem is with me. I don't have the capacity to take it because I'm so self-absorbed. I'm a spoiled little brat. And therefore, like, meh. Why don't this? Why don't that? But he says, follow this process and you'll come to realize how gracious and abundant is the mercy that I'm providing. And then we come to full knowledge, and we have this full intention of serving Krishna, and then we actually cross the Rubicon and come to that point of loving service. And we did it. And last point, if Krishna didn't give us full choice to take the wrong thing, that's not no choice at all. And when Gandhi was moving forward with his freedom movement, the British said, like, you guys can't manage this. Because only we British can manage things. And Gandhi said, freedom means the ability to do the wrong thing. You have to give that. So that's what Krishna gives to the living entity, freedom to do the wrong thing, until we come to the point of saying, no mas. I just want Krishna. I'm going to surrender. Then there's love. Love can't be forced. Just try it. I mean, don't try it. But if you try to force somebody to love you, it's like, no, love me, love me. There's lots of movies about that. It's like, you don't love me anymore? How come? Come on, bring a sign up. You just... it's unseemly, actually. But when there's a natural process through which the person comes to full realization and gives his or her heart to Krishna, then everything's available. Prabhu?
In the back.
Maharaj, my question is related to fear. In this material world, we experience a lot of fear. There is fear of unknown, there is fear of future, there is fear of past. Fear of being rejected by somebody whom you expect them to love you. And, there are so many phobias, stage fear, fear of heights, on and on and on. It goes on. My question is, as a practicing devotee, can we ever overcome this fear and, completely get rid of the fear from this material body when you are in this material world?
I defer to my esteemed godbrother, who I find to be fearless, walking in this world.
I was afraid you were going to ask me that.
We'll be here all week.
We didn't rehearse this either. No. It's a very interesting phenomenon in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the second canto, we find, just at the end of the first canto, Sukadeva Goswami arrives on the scene. And then the second canto begins with him answering Parikshit Maharaj's question, is what should one do when he is on the threshold of death? And with a little bit of preamble, he says, I'm going to recite the Srimad Bhagavatam to you. And then there's a very interesting verse that just pops up there. Itanya vidyavananam ichatam akuto bayam yoginam nripaninitam harinam anokirtanam. And then he says there that the doubtless and fearless way for all, whether one be possessed of all material desires, whether one be a yogi or whether one be a self-satisfied personality. The doubtless and fearless way for all of these people is to chant the holy name after the ways of the great authorities. Akuto bayam, doubtless and fearless. So, again, like I was saying before, false ego doesn't disappear immediately. And fear of things doesn't disappear immediately. And having said that, we can actually engage that fear to our advantage. Prabhupada used to say the problem with my disciples is that they're not afraid enough of Maya. So underneath all of this is what should, and also in regard to the previous question, is the issue that Srila Prabhupada points to again and again in his teachings, where he says, due to a poor fund of knowledge. Due to a poor fund of knowledge. And then in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 4.9, who knows 4.9? Janma kama chamedevyam evam yoga. Everybody knows it, come on. Everybody knows it. Just by understanding the transcendental nature of Krishna's birth and his appearance, his activities in this world, one does not, upon leaving this material body, have to take birth again in the material world. Everybody knows it, yes? What's the next verse? Yes. Vita raga bhaya krodha. Vita raga bhaya krodha. Becoming completely free from attachment, fear, and anger. Many, many persons in the past, through cultivation of knowledge of me, have attained love for me. So knowledge is acquisition of knowledge, full knowledge. Just like this question about why is there so much suffering in the world? You can counter that by saying, well, why are you here? Underneath all of this, we have a poor fund of knowledge because we don't understand, we don't know that the material world is not everything. We've forgotten that. But as I said, you weren't here earlier, I said forgetfulness and remembrance are predicated on knowledge. If you don't know something, how can you forget it? Or how can you remember it? Just like there was a controversy in ISKCON many years ago about the fact that we've never been, about the proposition that actually we've been eternally in Maya. We're eternally conditioned souls. We've never been with Krishna. But how do you go back somewhere you've never been? And this whole movement is for going back to Godhead. So as we gain knowledge of transcendence, of our own transcendental nature, and of the nature of the transcendental world, and we gain confidence in this reality by the process, as I said in my first little rant, by the process of developing actual dependence on Krishna, actually depending on Krishna. Then you don't necessarily see it straight away or feel it straight away, but it's like when you start off in the car, you're gaining momentum, then you're out on the freeway and you're cruising, and you lose the sense of how fast you're going. But then suddenly there'll be somebody going slower in the lane ahead of you, and you realize, oh my God. So Krishna is very kind. It's not that this process of Krishna consciousness is something that somebody dreamed up to give you a hard time with. I said this one time, and just think that pole, right? Say somebody greased that pole up and then said, now climb it. Another thing Srila Prabhupada says very often is Krishna is very much anxious for you to come back to him. And this Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, all of the books that Srila Prabhupada presented to us, the whole of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, all the 7 purposes, this is all a gesture of love from the Lord. Here, just take it. Take it. But we hesitate, and we look around and think, yes, what about this? What about that? What about the other? Krishna says, just surrender to me. I will deliver you from all of your sinful reactions. And that's where all of our fear comes from. The fear of pain and suffering in this material world. Fear that I'll be killed, fear, all of these things. And that's all just because we're entangled under the laws of karma. We're entangled in the interaction of the 3 modes of material nature. And we have no knowledge of anything beyond, especially in the world today. This is the Kali Yuga. This knowledge is practically lost. But thanks to Srila Prabhupada, and only Srila Prabhupada, it's all now being made available to anybody and everybody. And as soon as a sincere person, a sincere seeker of truth, hears this philosophy, it penetrates the heart. And initially you feel totally fearless. Yes! Like just the big yes. Aha! This is it. I remember sitting up in bed reading Bhagavad Gita at 2 o'clock in the morning. First off, couldn't make sense of the first chapter. And then Krishna starts to speak in the second chapter. And the first thing he describes is what you are. This is the beauty of, I think the most beautiful thing of Bhagavad Gita. If you take Bhagavad Gita as religious scripture, put it in that kind of categorization, and you put against it other religious scriptures. All other religious scriptures that you can think of begin with the description of the greatness of God, the almighty nature of God, the creator of heaven and earth, and this fearsome person. But Bhagavad Gita begins with a human being in a perplexed situation. And when Arjuna surrenders to Krishna and says, I'm confused, I'm bewildered here, I've lost them. I mean, there's 26 verses there spanning first and second chapter where Arjuna, this mighty warrior, goes through a total meltdown. And then he turns to Krishna and he surrenders to Krishna. Now you coming from Indian culture and so forth, you know, we know who Krishna is. But you think of a person picking up that Bhagavad Gita and starting to read it, and then this personality of Krishna is there. You don't really know who he is to start with. But he starts talking a lot of sense to you right from the beginning. And I was sitting there reading this, and I was brought up to believe I had a soul. But that really doesn't answer the question of, well, who am I? I've got a refrigerator as well, but I'm not, or there's another philosophy that if you act in the right way, you will develop a soul. Yeah. And I remember sitting there just reading those verses, and then suddenly the lights went on. Oh, I'm the soul. I'm this thing that Krishna's talking about. There's never a time when I didn't exist. There will never be a time when I don't exist. Nothing can kill me. Nothing can hurt me. Nothing. There's the beginning of fearlessness. Back to 14, through knowledge of me. Through real knowledge. Cultivate real knowledge. And real knowledge is not just, as Prabhupada said, armchair philosophy. Vishaya vinivatante niraharasya dehna rasapyasyam rasopyasya param dristva nivatate. This is experiential. It's personal and it's experiential. Mm-hmm. So you have to have the courage to approach Krishna one-to-one. You come and like I said, you come and you present yourself to Krishna. Here I am, my Lord. Please protect me. Please engage me in your service. Then this wonderful journey begins. Wonderful journey, yes? And it just gets better and better and better as time goes by. In the beginning, Maya will do all kinds of, the beginnings, you always consider yourself at the beginning because be afraid of Maya. She can get you at any time, especially when you think you've made it. Yeah. But take shelter. Take shelter. I'll just end with one little story about that. I believe this happened in Atlanta when Srila Prabhupada installed the Gaur-Nitai deities in Atlanta. And the next morning, he came in from his morning walk to greet the deities, and he stood for an inordinate amount of time in front of Gaur-Nitai. And he was obviously praying to them. And in his room, after the morning program, one devotee said, Srila Prabhupada, you were obviously praying very fervently to Gaur-Nitai this morning. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes. And so the devotee said, well, would you mind telling us what you were praying? I mean, we only do this kind of stuff when we're young. I couldn't imagine saying that to Prabhupada now. And Srila Prabhupada said, I was praying to Gaur-Nitai that I never fall into Maya. And then the devotee said, smart, smart Alex says, but Srila Prabhupada, isn't it a fact that a pure devotee never falls into Maya? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, because he's always praying to Gaur-Nitai that he never fall into Maya. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this is the path of doubtlessness and fearlessness, but it's a practice and it grows. Therefore, you must stay in the association of the devotees. You must. Because as soon as you step out, it's all raging out there. It's all going on. Anyway, that's enough. Thank you.
Rasa Sindhu Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Bhagavad Ashray Prabhu Guru Maharaj. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for being here. My question is that how do we increase our capacity to give? And how do we increase our capacity to give and serve? And the reason I'm asking this question is because earlier this week there was some of my friends are going through a really tough time, and I created space for them. I heard them out, and then they came up to me because they were going through this tough time. And after hearing them out, the next day I became depressed just because of the situation. It was overwhelming, and I had zero motivation to engage with my daily activities just because it was so overwhelming and overburdening. And I want to serve, show up for these people and be there. But at the same time, I want to guard and protect what's happening and my practices. So I'm not sure, Prabhu. I feel kind of stuck in some sense that how do I increase this capacity to give and create space even for people who are non-devotees per se. They are my work colleagues, and Krishna consciousness may not be a viable immediate remedy or solution to their needs. So what is the solution for a devotee to be in this situation, and what can I do, Prabhu? Thank you.
In the practice of Krishna consciousness, as Bhagavad Ashraya Prabhu was so eloquently describing, there's actual life that one lives, a life that one lives. Vidyam cha yas tadvedopayam saha avidyayam ratum tirtva vidyayam ratum ashnute. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. It's an integrated process. And if one is keeping good association, as Bhagavad Ashray Prabhu is recommending, and we continue the process, Vrindasevika this morning was saying, if you sponge in the holy name in your japa in the morning, then there's no room for anything else later. Even though we will feel at some times overwhelmed by the circumstances and association and find ourselves even like existentially, temporarily estranged from Krishna consciousness, we're kind of on the outside looking in and we go like, wait, what? Why am I doing this again? And that's not a bad thing. Actually, that's another opportunity to reinforce the process. And that's why it is a process. It's a daily process because it's expected that you're going to live your life. You can't do otherwise. There is no retreat from your duties in the material world, and they're going to be onerous. And your association's also going to be onerous too, because different kinds of people come in your life and you can't get away from it. Can you? 52 cousins? If you move back, of course, you're going to move to Silicon Valley and get a respite. But there's growth in that. And the way that is most recommended to overcome these particular situations where you feel suddenly depleted because of association is to already have your network of guidance in place. This is highly recommended. Guya makyati prishati. You should have the association of those that you trust implicitly, that you know this foundation is strong. They're in your upline. And you can go to them as much as you wish, daily if you need to, and say, look I'm fried. What should I do now? And why are you fried? Let's talk about it. And in the process of doing that, that's where maturity takes place. That's actually how, by these little victories, one after another, after the initial period Bhagavad Ashray was speaking about, where, this is it, I'm in all the way. And then you go like, okay, now there's a journey to take. And along that journey, it's a crucible, which is a way that gold is purified. You put gold with, maybe it's mixed with other things in this extremely hot environment, and then the pure gold runs out, the impurities go the other way. So in these tests, we get the benefit of looking at ourselves and saying, again, why am I doing this? And then taking shelter of those who know why we're doing it. They're in a higher rung of the ladder, and they can say, okay, come up here. You're going to be okay. And then you come back with realized knowledge. And unless you live life and you apply Krishna consciousness, you don't get realized knowledge. It's armchair stuff. It's like, yes, yes, and then I need a beedi, because you know what a beedi is? Most people don't. Need a cigarette on the side or some, but actually we get the real thing by living life, but then getting reinforced by those who are on a higher level of Krishna consciousness. So get a Rolodex and fill it up with mentors, and keep taking shelter of mentors. And you may have mentors for various particular situations that you need them for. Last word to Bhagavad Ashray, Prabhu, because we have to end in about 5 minutes.
Now, I'm thinking about like a little child, when we're little children, when we, first of all we learn to roll onto our stomach and then wriggle around, and then we find out these things start to work a little, and then we're crawling, and then we want to stand up, and you always fall flat on your face. Yes, and that hurts, but you didn't stay down. And the same thing that hurt you, you put your hands on it and push yourself back on your feet. So inherent in this is the concept of failure. Just because you may fail at something or fail in a given situation, it doesn't mean you're a failure. That's a very different thing. Even mundane motivational people and so forth, they'll tell you that even in all material endeavors, people who succeed are people who actually fail more than anyone else, but they don't give up. So the fail-safe way is exactly what Vaisesika Prabhu is saying. You have a network of support, and you don't put yourself out on a limb on your own. Actually, ever. And this is again the most wonderful thing about Srila Prabhupada, is that he put himself on the line on his own, and had complete faith in Krishna. Depended completely on Krishna. We can't necessarily do that. Necessarily, we can't do that. And as time goes by, that's shown. What an exceptional... of course, all devotees are exceptional people. Exceptional is the beginning. But amongst the most exceptional devotees, somebody like Srila Prabhupada will come along. And he created a situation for us to live in. And as Vaisesika is saying, you've got to live in the world, so live in the world in this Sangha. And don't ever leave it. You know? Don't ever leave it. There's another little story about Prabhupada where he said, one little old man, all on his own, if they had known why I was coming, they would never have let me in. And then he said, but I have lit a fire, and they can never put it out. So don't ever be fooled to think that I got nowhere to go. I got no one to turn to. Hmm? Yes. Hare Krishna. Oh. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Bhagavad Ashray Prabhu, for coming here and filling us up with the vibration that's so deep, because it's what's in your heart from your loyalty to Srila Prabhupada over 5 decades of practice of devotional service, and it's apparent the way you move in the world, the way you have no envy of other devotees, and the way that you speak so articulately about the process of devotional service, all backed up by the Shastra. Anyone who wants him to come back more, please say Hare Krishna.